Welcome to No Sleep, where the night never ends, and every whisper in the dark could be something real. Tonight's story isn't just horror. It's a memory, a warning, a door that should have stayed closed. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. There was a time when its sidewalks weren't cracked and choked by weeds, when the churches still rang their bells every Sunday morning, and the air didn't taste like rust and mold. But something had seeped into the bones of the town, slow, rotting, and irreversible. If you ask people around here, they'll tell you it's just the economy or the times. But that's a lie. Coleman died the night Harris Briggs did. I was born here, raised in a house my grandfather built with his bare hands. My grandmother used to drag me to church every week, lace my shirt collar tight, and whisper Bible verses into my ear when I was sick. She believed in God the way a drowning man believes in air. I used to believe too. But faith in Coleman is a fragile thing. It starts strong, then cracks like old paint, chipping away until all that's left is dust and denial. I've seen too much to believe anymore. And as the 2-year anniversary of Harris's murder approached, whatever was left in me turned to ash. He was 10, a good boy, polite, funny, never caused trouble. The kind of kid who still said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir." I knew his mama, Mabel, better than I knew him. We were high school friends once, laughed together in chemistry class, and shared cigarettes behind the gym. Life hadn't been kind to her, but she never stopped fighting. She worked 2 jobs, walked to both, and somehow still found time to raise her son right. That's what made what happened so goddamn cruel. They found Harris in a ditch outside town, bones shattered, body broken like a rag doll. The coroner's report leaked out in whispers. Strangulation, internal trauma, tire tracks. Things too evil to say out loud. The sheriff's office promised justice. They set up a perimeter, knocked on a few doors, and then they stopped. As if justice had a time limit. No one was arrested. No one even questioned. The town just moved on. Like forgetting was easier than caring. Except Mabel. She went to the sheriff's office every day for a 1.5 years. Rain or shine. Stood there in her worn coat, hands trembling, asking about updates, demanding answers. And every time she got the same fake sympathy, the same useless promises. "We're working on it, ma'am. We'll let you know if anything comes up." Behind closed doors, they mocked her. I heard them once, at Carl's Tavern, deputies laughing over beers, calling her a crazy bitch, a waste of time. Even Sheriff Watts, my damn neighbor, tried to get me to talk to her. Told me to calm her down, make her stop asking questions, like she was the problem. Then, 2 weeks before the anniversary, they made it official. They filed Harris's case under unsolved, tucked it away with the vandalized soda machines and stolen lawnmowers. Just another folder collecting dust. I remember sitting on my porch the night I heard, staring across the street at Sheriff Watts, raking his leaves like nothing had happened. Like his office hadn't just spit on a grieving mother. I wanted to scream at him, to drag him into the road and make him feel what she felt. But I didn't. I just sat there, quiet and ashamed. The truth is, Coleman has never been kind to folks like Mabel and Harris. The town wears its politeness like a mask, but you don't have to scratch deep to see what's underneath. Old blood, old hate, and a long history of looking the other way. You're either in or you're out, and Mabel had always been out. Poor black, alone, she didn't stand a chance. That's why I decided to visit her. Grandma always said that when someone you love is hurting, you bring them food. It's not about the meal, she said. It's about reminding them they're not alone. So I cooked what I could, a casserole, probably awful, and a tray of pork chops, and packed it into the truck. I didn't expect it to fix anything. I just didn't want her to feel like the whole damn world forgot her. On my way into town, I passed the holiday decorations being strung up. Red and green lights over Main Street, garlands around the bank, kids practicing carols on the church steps. Joy plastered over rot. Nobody cared about Harris anymore. Not really. Not enough to make space for grief between the Christmas sales and pie contests. When I pulled into Mabel's gravel driveway, I noticed something strange. A man, tall, clean, not from around here, stepped out of her front door. His suit was perfect, not a wrinkle in sight. His hair slicked back like he stepped out of a funeral parlor in 1960. He looked at me as he passed, eyes cold, black, empty. He nodded once, then walked off toward the street like he had nowhere to be and all the time in the world to get there. And when I looked back, Mabel was standing on her porch. Her face was pale. Her eyes were scared. I joked, trying to make light of it. Friend of yours? Nobody in Coleman owns a suit that nice, unless they're hiding a crime. She didn't laugh. Just business, she said quietly. I handed her the food. She hugged me. We went inside. The last photo of Harris hung on the wall, framed and dusted. His smile looked too big for the tiny room, like he knew more than a child should. We drank beers. We talked small. But Mabel's hand was wrapped in fresh gauze. Red spotted through the white like something still bleeding underneath. When I asked, she said it was a kitchen accident. Then, as I stood to leave, she grabbed my arm and stared into my soul. "Car," she whispered, "when you get home tonight, don't go outside after dark." Something in her voice didn't feel like a suggestion. It felt like a warning. Most people in Coleman forgot what happened to Harris Briggs by now. Or at least, they pretended to. Memory's a slippery thing in a place like this. It bends when you want comfort, and snaps when you try to hold on to the truth. But I remember it all. He died on a Tuesday. Cloudy sky, no rain, just the kind of gray that settles over you like a warning. The day dragged on with nothing special. People did their chores, kids went to school, and nobody knew the world had shifted until the news started to spread. A farmer found Harris's body 3 miles out of town, on a dirt path nobody used, unless they were dumping trash or hiding something. He was 10 years old, and what was left of him looked like he'd died screaming. The first report was simple. Young boy found deceased. But then the details crept out like oil spills, slow, dark, staining everything they touched. His legs were broken, twisted like branches. His throat had deep bruises in the shape of fingers. Worse, the coroner whispered things to people who liked to talk too much, about signs of torture, about something unnatural done to him before the final blow. They said someone had sodomized him, then ran over his small body with a truck, then strangled him, just to make sure he didn't live through the hell they'd given him. I'd never seen a town go so quiet so fast. The news hit like a church bell in a funeral home. Even the loudmouths in Carl's tavern kept their voices down for a few days. For a moment, Coleman held its breath, shocked, maybe even ashamed. But it didn't last. Nothing lasts in a town that feeds on forgetting. Soon the whispers started. It's awful. But maybe the boy was in the wrong place. Why was he walking out there anyway? Why wasn't his mama keeping track of him? The questions always turned inward, blaming the victim, doubting the mother, searching for reasons not to care. And when it came to action, to justice, nothing. The sheriff's department showed up late to the crime scene, didn't cordon it off, didn't call for help from the state. I heard the coroner asked for DNA tests to be expedited. The sheriff denied the budget, said it wasn't necessary. People wondered, quietly, wondered if they'd work harder if Harris had been white, if he'd been the son of a prominent family, if he'd had the right name or the right skin. I didn't have to wonder. I knew. And Mabel, she never stopped. From the moment she got the call, I swear that woman transformed. She became something harder than steel, sharper than grief. She stopped crying after the first week and replaced every tear with fury. You'd see her every morning walking down Main Street toward the sheriff's office, face like stone. "Any updates?" she'd ask. Always the same hollow answers. And yet she kept coming. They started locking the doors when they saw her. They whispered behind desks, "She's back again." She brought pictures, she brought notebooks, she brought theories, suspects, timelines. The deputies laughed at her behind her back, said she was going crazy, said she needed meds. One even called her a black Karen, as if wanting justice for your murdered son made you the problem. I was in the bar one night when I heard Deputy Jim say it. "That dumb bitch thinks she's some kind of detective, just because her kid got killed." His buddies laughed, but I didn't. I walked out and didn't go back for a month. Mabel kept coming, rain or shine, even on holidays, even when people crossed the street to avoid her. Then came the silence. 6 months in, they stopped answering her completely. 7 months, they stopped opening the door. After a year, they barely looked her way. And then, 2 weeks before the anniversary of Harris's death, Sheriff Watts did what I feared. He closed the case, labeled it unsolved. Just like that, it was over. They moved his file to the same cabinet where they keep reports of stolen bicycles and trespassing raccoons, like the brutal murder of a 10-year-old boy didn't deserve more than a shrug. They didn't even have the decency to wait until after the anniversary. When Mabel heard, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just walked out of the station and never came back. I didn't see her for 3 days after that. Some said she took time off work. Some said she left town. I knew better. There's a kind of silence that comes right before a storm. Not the loud kind, not the thunder or the wind. The kind of silence that crawls into your bones and tells you that something is about to break. That's what it felt like. Something had changed in Mabel. I felt it when I saw her that afternoon, standing on her porch, watching the man in the suit walk away. Her eyes weren't just sad anymore. They were ancient. Like she'd seen something no mother should see. Like she knew something the rest of us were too scared to understand. I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the gray suit. Who was he? What kind of business did a woman like Mabel have with someone like that? And more than anything, why did she look so afraid? I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared. Not yet, anyway. I just couldn't shake the image of Mabel standing on her porch with that look in her eyes. It wasn't sorrow. It was something colder. Like she was waiting for something. Or bracing for it. And then there was him. The man in the gray suit. He didn't belong in Coleman. No one dresses like that here. Pressed jacket, polished shoes, Hair slicked so tight it could reflect sunlight. There wasn't a speck of dust on him, not even a wrinkle in the crease of his pants. And those eyes, black as ink, no white at all, almond-shaped and sharp. The kind of eyes that look at you like they already know everything you've ever done. He didn't walk like a salesman or a preacher. He didn't walk like a man trying to sell you something. He walked like he already owned the place. When he passed my truck, I didn't say a word. I just nodded, some dumb reflex, and he nodded back with the faintest grin, like he was in on a joke I hadn't heard yet. His gaze didn't linger, but it carved through me, left me feeling like I'd been seen and judged and filed away in his mind like a document. As soon as he was out of sight, I turned to Mabel. She'd stepped down off the porch to meet me, holding her hand like it hurt, wrapped tight in gauze already stained through with fresh blood. I tried to keep it light. "Friend of yours?" I joked, nodding toward the road. "Ain't nobody in Coleman owns a suit like that, unless they're hiding tax evasion or corpses." She didn't smile. "Just business," she muttered. "Nothing you need to worry about." That's when it hit me. She looked tired. No, beyond tired. Like something inside her had been scooped out and replaced with smoke. Her eyes had always been fierce, even in grief, even in anger. But now they were distant, like she was somewhere far off, looking through me instead of at me. I handed her the food. She hugged me. It was warm, familiar, but she was cold. Inside her house, nothing had changed. The place was still spotless. Harris's picture still sat on the mantel, him in his church clothes, big smile, crooked tooth. That photo hurt me more than I expected. Something about it felt too alive, like the picture itself hadn't realized he was dead. She brought out beers. I didn't decline. It was then that I noticed the gauze on her hand again, dripping a little onto her pants. "You okay?" I asked, nodding to the wound. "Kitchen accident," she said, too fast. "Cut a tomato wrong. You know how it is." But the gauze didn't look like something done with a kitchen knife. It was wrapped too precisely, too tight, too deliberate, like someone else had done it for her, someone who knew what they were doing. I should have asked more questions, but I didn't, because sometimes the questions you want to ask feel like they come with consequences, like unlocking a door and not being able to close it again. We drank in silence for a while. She talked about her job, about the new cashier who kept messing up the registers, about how her landlord still hadn't fixed the back window. All small things, like the pieces of a life you keep rearranging to make it feel normal. But I wasn't listening. I was watching her. She kept glancing at the window. Not like she was expecting someone, more like she was hoping no one showed up. That's when I knew something was wrong. When I stood up to leave, she didn't walk me to the door right away. She stood in place, like she was weighing something heavy in her head. Then she followed me to the porch, and as I stepped off the last stair, she called my name. "Car?" I turned. She stared at me, really stared. For the first time that day, her eyes lit up with emotion. But it wasn't grief. It wasn't anger. It was fear. "I need you to promise me something." "What is it?" I asked, halfway to my truck. "When you get home tonight," she said, voice low, "don't leave your house after dark." I laughed a little, thinking she was being dramatic. You know I'm too lazy to go anywhere after sunset anyway. "I'm serious, Car," she interrupted. "Lock your doors. Don't look outside. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, stay inside." I took a few steps closer. "Mabel, what's going on? Just promise me." Her voice cracked. Not loud, not pleading, but like a thread snapping under tension. And in that moment, I understood something. Even if I didn't have the words yet. This wasn't grief. This wasn't trauma. This was something else. Something waiting. "All right," I said quietly. "I promise." She nodded once, like she'd been holding her breath. Then she turned and walked back into her house, closing the door behind her with a soft click. No wave. No goodbye. As I drove away, I glanced back at the porch. Empty, but I swear. And I don't care if you believe me. I saw something move behind her curtains. Just a shape, a silhouette, tall, still, watching. The sun set early that day, not just because it was winter. No, something about the light itself felt thinner, like even the sun was trying to get the hell out of Coleman before nightfall. I got home a little after 5, cracked open a beer, put on the Wildcats game, and sank into my recliner like it was any other Saturday evening. But it wasn't. Mabel's words were still in my head, echoing in the quiet corners of my mind. Lock your doors. Don't look outside. No matter what happens, stay inside. I tried to laugh it off. I really did. Maybe she was just scared. Maybe the anniversary was hitting her too hard. Maybe that strange man had her rattled. There were a dozen explanations, and I ran through every single one of them while sipping my beer and watching the scoreboard tick up. But none of them sat right. It was around halftime when I realized I hadn't eaten all day. Spent all afternoon cooking for Mabel, then got too wrapped up to fix anything for myself. My stomach growled and I dragged myself to the kitchen. Slim pickings, 2 slices of bread, a jar of pickles, some crackers that tasted like cardboard. I settled on a spoonful of peanut butter and called it dinner. That's when the phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was the landline. I still kept it hooked up in case of power outages. I shuffled over and picked it up. "Car?" came a familiar voice. Deputy Shelby, sounding winded. "You home?" "Where the hell else would I be?" I grunted. "I need you to go check on Sheriff Watts." I rolled my eyes. "You're a cop. Why don't you check on him?" "We've been trying to call. He's not picking up. Becky just found Jim dead." That sobered me up. Jim's what? Dead. Found in his welding shed. Something burned half his damn face off. I stood in stunned silence for a second, beer still sweating in my hand. Jesus Christ. We're trying to track everyone down, but Watts ain't answering. Can you just go across the road and knock? I didn't want to. Every bone in my body said no, but old habits die hard. Watts had been a garbage sheriff, sure, but he'd also been my neighbor for 20 years. We'd shared beers on porches, cooked ribs on the 4th of July. "I'll check," I said, "but you better get someone out here, now." I hung up, grabbed my coat, and headed for the gun cabinet. Loaded my old rifle with the last 2 rounds I had left. Hadn't been hunting in years, but I figured if someone was burning deputies alive, I might need it. I stepped outside. The cold hit me like a slap, sharp and sudden. The road between my house and the sheriff's was empty. No headlights, no voices. Just dark pines swaying in the breeze like they were whispering secrets to each other. Then I heard it. 3 loud bangs. Boom, 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 echoing across the fields. Gunshots, shotgun blasts, coming from the sheriff's house. I sprinted across the yard, heart hammering, lungs burning. I could see the flickering light inside his windows. Something was moving inside, fast, violent. The front door was locked. I kicked at it once, solid, then ran around the back. That door was hanging open, barely on its hinges. Splinters of wood littered the porch, like someone had torn through it with a battering ram. I stepped inside, and instantly, I knew something was wrong. The smell hit me first, copper and bile, and something burnt. The living room looked like a war zone, furniture overturned, the TV still flickering with basketball highlights. Shotgun shells scattered like confetti on the floor. The carpet, light blue, was stained dark red in long wet streaks. I called out, "Watts?" No answer, only the static drone of the TV and the low creak of the ceiling fan turning lazily above. I crept forward, my boots squishing in something thick. There were holes in the walls, blast marks, like someone had unloaded a shotgun in panic, and blood. So much blood. It looked like Watts had fought back, but whatever he was up against didn't bleed, or if it did, it didn't care. The hallway ahead of me was painted in crimson. Not literally, but it may as well have been. A smear of blood, hand-sized, ran along the wall all the way to the bedroom at the end. I followed it, every step louder than the last. The rifle in my hands felt like a toy. My fingers trembled, my breath shaky. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, like the house was growing around me. The door was cracked open, just enough to see the horror inside. I pushed it with my boot, and what I saw, I'll never unsee. Watts wasn't a man anymore. He was parts, piles of flesh stacked in the corners of the room. His intestines stretched like garlands across the walls. One hand still gripped his shotgun, though the arm was no longer attached. His head, or what was left of it, sat perched on a blood-soaked nightstand, mouth frozen mid-scream. The bed had been torn apart, the mattress soaked. The ceiling above was painted with arcs of blood, like someone had used the sheriff as a paintbrush. I staggered backward, bile rising in my throat. I puked into the hallway. Couldn't help it. My knees were weak. The rifle almost slipped from my hands. That's when I heard it. Not a growl, not a voice, but breathing. Heavy, wet, inhuman, coming from the yard outside the shattered bedroom window. Something was still here, watching, waiting. I raised the rifle with shaking hands, stumbling toward the back porch. The motion light flicked on. The woods behind the house, dark, tangled, shifted. Trees rustled, branches cracked, and something stepped into the light. What stepped into the yard wasn't human. It walked on two legs, sure. Towered at least 1.5 feet taller than me, broad-shouldered, arms like tree trunks. But that's where the similarities ended. Its skin was wrong. Gray like wet ash, stretched thin over sharp bones and knotted muscles, like something that had grown too fast, too wrong. Loose patches of flesh hung like torn curtains, and its movements were jerky, twitchy, as if it were learning how to move while moving. Then there were its eyes. God help me, the eyes. Red. Not glowing like a flashlight. No, more like burning. 2 smoldering coals sunk deep into that grotesque skull. They didn't blink, didn't dart or look away, just stared straight at me with a cold, quiet hunger that turned my blood to ice. Its mouth hung open, wide, too wide, revealing rows of yellow, jagged teeth, each one as long as my thumb. Blood dripped slowly from the corners of its lips, not like it had just eaten, but like it was still chewing. And above its head, antlers. Massive, twisted antlers, like those of a great buck, except they were cracked and warped. coated in dried gore and bits of hair. Something hung from one of them, a scrap of blue flannel, fluttering in the breeze like a forgotten flag. My legs refused to move. I stood frozen at the edge of the porch, rifle pointed, but hands shaking so bad I couldn't aim. The thing just stood there, half shrouded in shadows, breathing through long slits where a nose should have been. Every breath sounded like the wind rasping through a graveyard. It didn't charge. It didn't roar. It just watched. Then, a voice. "Car, get down." I barely registered the words before I heard the gunfire. 3 shots, fast and deafening. Each one slammed into the creature's chest. Clean hits from a Glock. I turned just in time to see Deputy Shelby standing behind me, pistol raised, eyes wide in horror. But the thing didn't fall, didn't even flinch. It looked down at the wounds, as if mildly curious, then back up at Shelby. Then it moved. I've never seen anything move like that. Not an animal, not a man. It crossed the yard in less than a second, a blur of gray and red, and grabbed Shelby by the throat with a hand as big as a dinner plate, lifted him clean off the ground. Shelby kicked and screamed, pistol dropping into the grass. His eyes bulged as he clawed at the thing's grip, legs flailing like a caught fish. He tried to speak, to plead, but nothing came out except choking gasps. I raised my rifle and aimed, but a hand touched my shoulder. I spun around, pulling the trigger, but the barrel jerked downward at the last second. The shot went into the dirt. Standing behind me, calm as a whisper, was the man in the gray suit. Not a hair out of place. Not a single wrinkle on his clothes. He wagged a finger at me like I was a child reaching for the cookie jar before dinner. "Tisk, tisk," he said. "Let it happen." "What the hell are you talking about?" I screamed, trying to raise my rifle again. He pushed the barrel back down with one pale, gloved hand. He didn't even look at me when he spoke again. His attention was fixed on the scene unfolding before us. "I made a deal," he said softly, "and I plan to honor it." The creature let out a low, guttural noise, not quite a growl, not quite a laugh. And then it sank its claws into Shelby's chest. Shelby's scream turned into a gurgle as the monster tore him open like a bag of garbage. Blood sprayed across the yard. The sound, bones snapping, organs squelching, was wet and final. The creature dropped what was left of him to the dirt, intestines trailing behind like ribbons. I fell to my knees and puked again. My rifle clattered beside me. The suited man knelt beside Shelby's mangled body and examined it. Not with horror, not with sympathy, but with interest, the way a jeweler examines a stone. "Yes," he murmured, "that will do nicely." The creature turned toward me. We locked eyes, if those burning pits could be called eyes. And for a second, I thought it would kill me too. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would explode. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't pray. I was completely at its mercy, but it didn't attack. It tilted its head, studied me. There was something in its gaze, not kindness, but recognition, like it knew me. Then the man in the suit spoke again. "That's enough for tonight." He turned and walked toward the woods, motioning with a single hand. The monster followed, lumbered past me with those enormous antlers, swaying gently, footsteps heavy as drums. As it passed, I caught a closer look at its hand, the right one, wrapped in dirty, blood-soaked gauze. My breath caught in my throat. I'd seen that same bandage earlier that day, on Mabel's hand. The realization hit me like a freight train. I collapsed. Legs gone, mind spinning. The man and the creature vanished into the woods without a sound, swallowed by the black pines. And I was left there, kneeling in blood, staring into the empty dark, knowing that whatever walked into Mabel's house that day didn't walk out the same. I don't know how long I stayed on the ground, long enough for the blood to soak through my jeans, long enough for the motion light to flicker off, plunging the yard into total darkness again, long enough for the cold to bite through my skin, and for every sound, every rustle, every breath to feel like a threat. Eventually I moved. I don't remember walking back to my house, only that I ended up there, door bolted, rifle discarded on the porch. My boots left streaks of gore on the floor, but I didn't clean them. I just collapsed into my chair, shaking, watching the empty screen of my muted TV like it might show me a different version of the night. But the images stayed the same. That thing tearing Shelby apart, the red eyes, the gauze on its hand, Mabel. I kept trying to reason with myself. Monsters aren't real. People don't turn into things like that. But denial is fragile when your boots are wet with someone else's blood, and the screams of a dying man are still ringing in your ears. I didn't sleep. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I had to see her. Not just for answers. Not even for comfort. I needed to know what the hell she'd done. The streets were empty when I drove back into town. Coleman looked the same. Quiet, still, dust settling into the cracks of the sidewalks. The world hadn't changed. But I had. I parked in front of Mabel's house and just stared at it for a while. There were no lights on. The curtains were drawn tight. No birds chirped. No wind stirred. Just silence. I knocked once, then twice. No answer. I raised my hand for a third when the door opened. Not wide, just a crack. And Mabel peered out, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. "Car?" she said, like I was the last person she expected to see. "We need to talk," I said. "Now." She didn't move for a moment. Then she nodded and stepped back, letting the door swing open. The house was darker than I remembered. Curtains pulled shut. Candles burned in every corner. The scent of sage and iron hung in the air. I glanced at the kitchen table and saw a bowl of what looked like ash and teeth. My stomach turned. Mabel sat without saying a word. She motioned for me to do the same. I didn't ask how she knew what I'd seen. I didn't have to. She looked tired, older, like she'd aged 10 years overnight. But her eyes weren't haunted anymore. They were calm, clear, like someone who'd made peace with something monstrous. "You saw it," she said softly. "I saw something," I replied, keeping my voice low. "And I saw the man in the suit." Mabel nodded. "He came to me about 3 months ago, said he could help, said justice didn't have to mean waiting anymore." "What is he?" She took a breath. "Not God, but close enough. Or maybe older." My mouth went dry. "You made a deal." She didn't look away. "I gave him what he wanted, and in return, he gave me what I needed." I thought of the creature, its claws, its teeth, its rage. And what was that? Revenge? Mabel nodded. "But at what cost?" I snapped. "That thing killed 2 men last night. Ripped them apart. You think that's justice?" "They laughed at my son's death," she said, voice rising. "They buried the case in dust. I begged, I pleaded, and they turned their backs. So yes, Carr, I do. I think it's justice." I stood, heart pounding. "You're talking about murder." "No," she said coldly. "I'm talking about balance." For a moment, All I could do was stare at her. Then I said what had been clawing at the inside of my skull since the moment I saw the creature. That thing, it had your hand. She didn't answer. Mabel, I whispered. Was that you? Still, she didn't answer. But she didn't deny it either. And in the silence that followed, I felt the truth wrap itself around my spine like a snake. She had become it. Or maybe something had been put inside her. Maybe that's what the man in the suit had done. Grafted vengeance onto her soul. Turned her grief into something real. Something alive. Something with claws and teeth. It only comes when I call, she said finally. How many more? Just one, she said. One more and it's over. Who? She looked up at me, eyes cold and empty. The man who closed the file. Watts. My stomach sank. He's already dead, I said quietly. I saw what was left. She didn't look surprised. That was never for me, she murmured. He was the offering. I stared at her, unsure whether to scream or run. What happens now? Mabel stood, walked to the window and peeked through the curtain. Now I wait. The man in the suit will come again, and when he does, I'll leave with him. To where? Wherever people like us go, she whispered. I turned to leave, my hands shaking. As I opened the door, she spoke again. Car? I paused. Thank you for bringing me food yesterday. My boy always liked your cooking, even if you didn't. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Then stepped into the light, not sure if I'd ever see her or whatever she'd become. Again. I left Mabel's house with the weight of the world pressing on my shoulders. The streets of Coleman looked the same. Cracked pavement, peeling paint, the quiet rustle of dead leaves skittering down gutters. But everything felt wrong. The sunlight didn't shine the way it used to. It felt distant, muted, like the town itself knew what had happened and was trying to hide. I drove home slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't know what I'd do once I got there. What do you do after learning that justice in your town now comes on clawed feet and drinks blood for payment? What do you do after watching a woman you once laughed with in chemistry class become a weapon of grief? I didn't have answers. Just 1,000 questions and a house that felt too empty. By nightfall, I was sitting on my porch with the lights off, staring at the road, waiting, listening, wondering if I'd hear that thing again. The heavy steps, the cracking branches, the breathing. But it never came. Not that night, not the next. The town moved on, because that's what Coleman does best. They buried Shelby and Jim with closed caskets and whispered rumors. Meth deal gone bad, satanic cult, some lunatic from Birmingham. Nobody talked about the real truth. They wouldn't believe it if I told them. Hell, I barely believed it. I avoided Mabel's street after that. I couldn't bring myself to look at her windows. Couldn't stand the thought of what might still be living behind those curtains. I half expected to see claw marks on the glass or antlers pressed against the panes at night. But her house stayed quiet. No more visitors. No more shadows. Then, a week later, she was gone. Not just missing. Gone. Every light off. Mail piling up. Curtains open for the first time in months. I knocked, I called, I asked the neighbors. Nothing. No one had seen her leave. No one heard her leave. One day she was there. The next day, empty. I broke into her house that night. I know it was wrong. I don't care. The door creaked open like it had been waiting. Inside, everything was still and cold. The air smelled like dust and rusted metal. The candles had all burned down into puddles. The kitchen table was cleared, but on the wall, above the spot where Harris's photo used to hang, was something new. A symbol, scorched into the drywall. It looked like an eye, long and thin, slitted, with curling antlers arching out from the top. Beneath it, words written in something too dark to be paint. One debt paid. I stood there for a long time, my hands trembling at my sides. She'd done it. Whatever the cost was, she paid it. But I couldn't help but wonder, what else did she give up? And more importantly, what else did she unleash? Weeks passed, then months. I tried to go back to normal, worked odd jobs, fixed up the house, drank more than I should. But sleep never came easy, not anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. The red eyes in the dark. Shelby's scream. The man in the gray suit standing calm while the world tore itself apart. I wondered if he was still watching. If he had moved on to another town, another deal, another soul desperate enough to sign away their humanity for justice. Or if Coleman was still under contract, just waiting for the next payment to come due. That's when I started writing this all down. Not for anyone else, not for the cops, not for the papers, for me. So I'd remember. So I'd know that I hadn't imagined it all, hadn't lost my damn mind. Because some days, I really started to wonder. Then, last night, I saw him again. Not the creature, him. The man in the gray suit. He was standing in the middle of the street outside my house. Just standing, like he'd always been there. Hands folded in front of him, eyes locked on mine. I didn't go outside. I didn't move. I just stood behind my curtain and stared at him. He didn't wave, didn't smile. But after a minute, he lifted one hand, slowly, and pointed toward the woods. Then he vanished. I don't know what that means. But I know what it feels like. It feels like the story's not over. It feels like Mabel's deal was only the beginning. There's a sickness in this town, not one you can treat with medicine or prayer. It grows in the silence, in the unspoken things, in the spaces where justice should live but never does. I used to think God abandoned Coleman. Now I know better. He was pushed out. Something else moved in. Something older. Something that doesn't forgive. Something that answers prayers with claws and teeth and burning eyes. And we welcomed it, with every injustice ignored, with every mother dismissed, with every file shoved in a drawer to rot. Mabel didn't create the monster. We did. She just called it home.